Welcome back to another episode of English and Beyond, the advanced version. We have a transcript on our website as well as flashcards to help you practice the most difficult vocabulary that is available at www.morethan.a language.com. As always, well, not as always, but as often, I have César here with me, and we're just going to have a little bit of a chat, aren't we, César? Mm-hmm. No monologue today.
Yeah.
But this is something that we've both experienced. It's not something inherently British or English. It's just something really common and ordinary if you've ever lived abroad. So what are we going to discuss today, César?
I'm reading the topic on your computer, on your laptop. Culture shock.
Culture shock. Shall we read a definition of that?
Okay.
Culture shock refers to feelings of uncertainty, confusion, or anxiety that people may experience when moving to a new country or experiencing a new culture or surroundings. Mm-hmm. So straight off this, have you ever experienced culture shock?
Of course I have. Yeah.
When and where?
I did. I think my first memory of a culture shock was when I visited Dominican Republic with my dad. I was like 12 or so. So it was my first time crossing the pond, crossing the Atlantic. It was my first time in Central America, or in America, full stop. And it's obviously a very different country from Spain. And the thing that really blew my mind was seeing the butchers and seeing the meat on the street without any health and safety, in place. And because my whole family comes from the meat industry and they are working in the abattoirs or they work
as butchers.
As butchers, yeah, that really, really shocked me.
We should say actually that the Dominican Republic is a really big holiday destination for Spanish people.
It is, yeah.
I don't know anyone from the UK, for example, who's gone to the Dominican Republic, but it's somewhere where people go often from Spain.
Yeah, they love Spanish people, love their resorts. And actually, most resorts in Dominican Republic are owned and run by Spanish people.
By Spanish hotel chains.
Spanish hotel chains, yeah.
So I was going to say, actually, I suppose you can have a temporary culture shock just by being there on holiday. But it's not the same. I think, actually, I feel very strongly now that it is a very different feeling. The culture shock that I've got moving to Spain from just being on holiday, because it wasn't, I would say that I've probably had the biggest culture shock of my life here in Spain, even though it's actually the country I probably knew the best, definitely the country that I knew the best before moving to it, and the country that I spoke the language the best in of all of the countries that I've lived in. And yet
you've been dating a Spaniard for 8 years, so you through me got to know the culture as well in the UK.
I knew what I was getting, and yet I still have had a culture shock. And so you can have a culture shock, I suppose, from a holiday, but I don't think it's the same thing. Yeah.
Well, in that case, my first culture shock was when I first moved to the UK, and things from like kissing everyone or, saying things that are completely normal in Spain, but they weren't in the UK.
Aggressively rude in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Like, oh, wow, you're looking pretty fat.
No. But and now I'm experiencing the opposite, the reverse culture shock. Yeah, when you move back to your country after living abroad for a few years.
Because I think that we've kind of like hinted towards this, haven't we? That we have experienced some sort of culture shock, maybe more in the Spanish podcast than in this one. But I don't think we've talked about it in detail. And I think it is quite an interesting topic. And people have asked me before to talk about my experiences of living in China. And I probably should do a whole episode on that. And I'm going to do a whole episode on Germany. Definitely, yeah. I've written it already. But you also spent a little bit of time living in the US, right? Or, a month or two.
Well, I got a grant or a scholarship from the Spanish government to study English in New York.
Was that before or after London, the first time?
Before. I was 21, yeah.
Okay.
And I spent only 1 month. So it's not like I settled that, but, you get to know, or you get to have a routine in the city. I was in New York, in Manhattan, but I can't really remember any culture shock there. to be honest.
Well, and I actually think that for me is part of the definition of culture shock, because I think part of moving to a place is getting that routine, as you said. So not being on holiday. I think for me at least, you might have a holiday really mapped out, programmed down to the last minute, but it's still a holiday if you're doing things which are not normally the things that you would do, or you're not doing the same thing every day, or you're doing nothing at all. You're just totally relaxed. For me, that's almost part of the definition of a holiday. Whereas being in a place for a longer term period of time, plus you are just kind of doing ordinary life, or you've got a stable routine that you're doing without being that exciting. For me, that's kind of closer to moving to a place. Obviously, you didn't move to the USA if you lived there for only a month, but you're not on holiday either.
No, it was something in between. That's true.
Yeah, but I think that knowing that you're going to stay for a longer time then has a much bigger impact on your mentality, and also that can cause a culture shock. Because I was saying to you earlier today that when I went to live in Beijing, I was only there for 6 months, and I knew I was never going to stay in Beijing. At least then, I suppose I thought it was possible I would come back to the country, but I knew at that point I wasn't going to go to Beijing and stay in Beijing. I knew that I had my flight booked home, and so I don't think I ever actually had a culture shock in Beijing. I was like, oh wow, that's interesting, that's different. I even had to set up a bank account, get a phone contract, do all of those things, go and visit the police station for my immigration visa, all sorts of different things like that. But it always just felt so temporary. Whereas in Spain, I think that I've had a much more significant one, because I could be here forever. I could die in Valencia, whereas I never really expected to die, in Beijing.
Yeah.
So did you feel that way about London did you feel when you went to London, okay, I might be here forever? Or did you always think you would come back to Spain?
Yeah, I guess I never felt I was going to stay forever. But now that I moved back to Spain, I don't feel I'm going to stay here forever either. Like I feel like I'm still quite young to only live in one place for the rest of my life. I mean, you never know, but I'm quite open. And I don't have that sense of belonging either.
Yeah.
I didn't have it in the UK after living there for 10 years. But I mean, it's not like an unpleasant feeling. Like it's not like I'm feeling disconnected from the world or anything like that. It's just like I feel I'm quite lucky that I got to experience living in different places within Spain and the UK, because I had lived in Barcelona as well, which is a really good place to live for a while.
Did you get any culture shock moving from Valencia to Barcelona? So even within the same country, was it sufficiently different to
Well, yeah,
provoke?
I guess some things are done differently than in Valencia. And I was living in a place, because you visited me many times, in a very touristic area in Barcelona. So at times I felt I was living inside an amusement park rather than in a European city.
Was it you spraying on all the walls, tourists go home?
No. I'm not tourist phobic. No. But yeah, I think the most weird thing is coming back to your country. Coming back or going back. Or either way, it depends on the perspective.
It depends.
Okay.
Yeah. Where are you? You're in Spain.
Yeah.
So it's coming back.
Coming back. And realizing, firstly, noticing all the things that have changed in your country, positively and negatively. Mostly positive. I feel quite positive about the changes that Spain has gone through. Yeah, and getting used to the things that remain the same and you had forgotten.
Yeah, I really agree with that, because I would say twice going back to London after living abroad, I was shocked by what I found when I got back. One was after coming back from Beijing, and incredibly, I thought, wow, London is so empty. London's so tranquil. It's so calm.
It's not people, only 10 million people.
Yeah, exactly. Getting on the tube in London was so much easier than getting on the tube in Beijing.
Really?
Yeah, because in Beijing, at my tube station at least, and I think it was true everywhere, you had to queue to get into the tube station. You had to go through security to get onto the tube. You had to have your bag scanned, and then at certain times the tube stations were so busy, or the metro stations were so busy, that the queue to get into them was absolutely massive.
Wow.
And where I lived in Beijing was also just it was quite chaotically fun. Like there was a train track right through the middle of the neighborhood, like a kind of a national train, and so you just felt like things were happening all the time, all around you. There were so many people in the streets, so many people in the metro, so many people everywhere. And that was one extreme. And then the other extreme of the big cities that I've lived in, Frankfurt, where theoretically, it's the financial hub of Germany. It is a very modern city. I really liked Frankfurt. I thought it was a really cool city. But going back to London from Frankfurt, I thought London just was so buzzing and too many people, and I almost got run over several times. Whereas in Germany, in Frankfurt, everything was so much more sedate, so much calmer. I did so many kind of weekend walks, that kind of thing, as opposed to just the hustle and bustle of London as a capital city.
Yeah. What is the biggest culture shock you've experienced so far in Valencia? We've been here for 6 months now.
Mm-hmm. I don't know whether I'm going to sound like a broken record, whether we've discussed it in this podcast. That's true, actually. I meant to say that next week is our six-month anniversary of moving to Valencia. But it's going to be really it's unsurprising, and I'm sure you can guess already the word that I'm going to use. What is that word for the culture shock?
Well, it's difficult for me to pronounce, so you can correct me, because I'm sure many people will have the same trouble.
Well, we definitely have said this, right? Then we've talked about this topic because
bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, yeah.
Did I get it right?
Yeah. Bureaucracy. So definitely the bureaucracy. The paperwork. I have to say, though, in fairness to Spain, when you start the bureaucratic process for anything, they say to you, this says 3 months, but it's going to be 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And then it's actually every time I've had to do anything, it's been much less than the time that they're supposed to do it in. It's really hard to get started, but once you've handed everything over, it's turned out to be okay. Mm-hmm. So I would say that, really. But walking around Valencia, living here, I feel pretty much at home now.
You're used to supermarkets. Do you miss anything food-wise?
This is shocking in many levels. I actually really miss the UK supermarkets, but I miss it for reasons that Spanish people will find ridiculous, which is that I miss all of the processed ready meals. Because I say processed, but it's not even processed in a bad way. And it's very wasteful and everything. But I love the fact that in the UK, you can go whatever kind of vegetable you want, whatever kind of kind of potato mix or rice mix or whatever. There are so many different versions that you can have. So you can have absolutely no culinary skill. Mm-hmm. You can have no interest in cooking. And you can, in the UK, throw together a meal pretty quickly with things that you heat in the oven or in the microwave that are actually healthy if you choose carefully, and quite tasty. And there's so much variety. Whereas in Spain, you actually really kind of have to cook.
Yeah, or buy the already cooked meals in, like pasta or paella, things like that.
Yeah, but there's a way smaller choice here than in the UK. Yeah, I feel also like for the things that we eat, like a lot of the vegetarian stuff, I feel like there is less of a choice. So I do miss that.
Yeah. Do you know what is the thing I miss the most food-wise?
What?
Oat milk. Like the brands that I used to buy.
I would say oat milk because it sounded a bit like old milk. And it's like, well,
oat
milk.
Oat milk.
Yeah.
Yeah. how do you say? Because basically the ones I get to buy here in Spain, every time I mix them with a hot coffee, the in Spanish, like the milk gets cut, so the creamy of the milk gets separated from the water. It's like custard. It's quite disgusting. So I don't know why they can get it right here in Spain with the oat milk.
Or to ensure that that there's no separation.
Speaking about Germany, for me it was quite shocking when I first put my first foot in Germany.
Well, you had a culture shock despite never being there for longer than 2 days.
Yeah, but a bit. The reality is in Frankfurt, when I stepped out from the bus, I saw a needle exchange. I saw like a street full of brothels. And I was like, wow, this is not the Germany I was expecting. Then I saw more and I liked it and everything, but I was really, really shocked by that.
It's the kind of thing you might expect in Berlin instead of Frankfurt.
Yeah, probably. And I like they dropped me off by the train station, and always the neighborhoods near the train stations in big cities are like that, right? How was Frankfurt? Because you love Germany, you love German people, the German language. And I don't know how to say someone who loves Germany and German people. Is there a word for that?
I don't know. Deutschfile? Okay. That sounds very, very weird.
Anyway, you got to live there for a while.
Yeah.
You weren't super happy about your job, but you liked the people you met there. You made some German friends. I guess the culture in Germany is closer to the culture in the UK. But you can tell me about it. Do you get many culture shocks?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. I was very happy in Frankfurt, and it's actually remarkable how happy in Frankfurt I was, considering how unhappy I was with certain aspects of the job.
I thought you were going to say compared to how unhappy I am now.
That would be very, very intense and profound for this episode. But I don't think that happiness that I had in Germany was because I felt at home with the German people more than I did in Italy or in China or in Spain. I know everyone says and everyone expects that Germans and British people are very similar, but I actually don't think that we are that similar. I think there are lots of differences, and so I never felt German.
Yeah. The sense of humor is completely different, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Although I know a lot of Germans say that they like the British sense of humor, but no, I think it is very different. Like I think that ours is more meta, like more sarcastic and darker. More kind of darker and more self-effacing than what I've seen in Germany so far. But any German listeners can recommend, great German comedy. Actually, I think like lots of the German comedies that kind of go international are kind of British in their style, like that film about Hitler coming back from the dead. In modern Germany. I think that to me seems like a very British concept as well. That's the kind of thing that we would find very funny for a comedy film. But the question was, did I have any culture shock in Germany?
I found really weird that you could smoke in some clubs, bars in Germany, for example.
Yeah, I suppose actually my culture shock in Germany, and I'm going to talk about this in my German episode, is probably that what I expected of the Germans is not what they're actually like. Because before moving to Germany, I think I'd spent like one weekend in Berlin. I knew nothing about Germany, and I had, I think, a very British point of view on Germany, because I thought very stereotypically that Germans would follow, the law to the letter. And in some respects they do. Like I was always really struck by the fact that you cannot cross the road unless there is a green light to do so. Like that is one of my, standout memories of Germany, how closely everyone stuck to that rule. But then clearly there must be a rule that allows them to all smoke in bars, because basically all of the bars that I went to allowed smoking.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So I think that for me does kind of describe the contradictions of German culture, which I didn't expect there to be those contradictions. But I suppose it makes sense when you think of like the reputation that Berlin has internationally for being such a kind of far out, no holds barred partying destination.
Say that again. No
holds barred. It's
What is
like
that?
no limits.
Okay.
You can do what you like, kind of thing. It's just basically something without constrictions and limits, restrictions. So I think Germany clearly has, two faces, two identities, like every country. But I think naively, before I got to know Germany at all, I thought Germany wouldn't be like that, essentially. Yeah. So that was probably my culture shock. Thank you. Well, thank you, César.
Thank you.
for coming to the living room to do this episode with me. And please, it'd be nice if we could thank you too, listener.
Thank you
for listening, but also for sharing and rating and everything
can
like
I
that.
make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Maybe the listeners could leave like write a comment to practice their advanced English.
Yeah.
Telling us if they've experienced any culture shock.
Telling us how wrong we are about all of our opinions. Please do, as long as it's in good English. So thank you very much for listening, and until next time. Goodbye. Welcome back to another episode of English and Beyond, the advanced version. Welcome back to another episode.
You should put up bloopers.